Hey guys, Kenny here. Just before we get started, I wanted to apologize for the month of not being here. Fact of the matter is, I'm lucky enough to have gotten a bunch of really cool documentary DP jobs. So I was doing a lot of that. I was traveling a lot. It was just hard to, juggle these two things. But I've banked up a lot of great episodes. There's actually a lot more on the way. I just got to respond to all the emails. So don't worry, podcast isn't going anywhere. I just had a lot of work. Luckily, good for me, yada, yada. But yeah, you're going to love this one. My friend Powell, he's incredible. A lot of great information on this one, but just wanted to say that up front. And what else? I don't know. Advertise. There's a Patreon now, if you didn't know. Patreon.com/frameandrefpod. You can do that if you want or not. And if you'd like to know about the docs I'm working on, I guess you can follow me personally on Instagram at KW McMillan. Cause they're one of them sports related. One of them is more social, issues, climate change, food scarcity, that kind of thing. But they're very cool. You're going to like them. Anyway, I'll let you get to it. Welcome to another episode of Frame and Reference. I'm your host, Kenny McMillan, and you're listening to episode 163 with Powell Robinson, DP of Mr. Crocket. Enjoy.
But yeah, no, I did have to look it up. I was like, I feel like isn't it going to be weird if he's like 2 episodes behind? And it was like, nope, a year of episodes.
Yeah, wild.
What have you? I mean, obviously, besides Crocket, what have you been doing? But since then,
it's been a weird mix of things. Back to some like really crazy high concept music videos. Did some like all green screen, heavy VFX world kind of stuff. Shot a couple shorts. I've had two TV shows in development for a while now, and so those are just moving along. And planning the next features. So got one this year, and bunch that want to shoot next year, so hopefully the whole next year is just all movies.
Hell yeah. Because I know, like, I was certainly dead up until like 2 months ago when I started this documentary I've been shooting, and that obviously like pinballed into other work, but boy, it was slow for most people.
This year was there were months just sitting around, but it was usually like 1 month off, 1 month back on, and it was just like it just felt so inconsistent and weird.
Yeah.
That I can see that it's sticking.
Oh, dog. Shit, you look better than me. I look like I need to get a haircut so bad. Yeah, I'm lucky, I guess, that I didn't build a lifestyle for myself that was unsustainable off very little income, because I just haven't had like a great career thus far.
Film, that's kind of it's not great until it might suddenly be great.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for the shoe to drop where it's like, all right, well, here's your first, whatever multi-$1,000 gig. And I'm just like, all right, all that's going in the bank and I'm not moving.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Do you, I literally just watched the Crocket film, so that's all I'm thinking of. And that.
Okay, yeah, no, I'm ready. I'm ready to jump in when you want to actually sorry, I wasn't sure if we were officially going yet or not.
No, it was just more, usually I will talk about other stuff first, but I didn't watch any of your other stuff. I just watched that.
Yeah.
I mean, all the stuff you put on your Instagram looks fucking sick, I will say.
Thank you.
Not that it didn't before, but even just looking at it, like, yeah, you really have had a whole bunch of really dope stuff come out.
Yeah,
go for it.
Okay, luckily I had a couple companies that were still doing these really fun big music videos that carried me through a lot of the dead parts of this year, waiting for movies to come back.
Yeah, because like how much, actually I think that's probably a great place to start, is like, so Prequel is a music video, I assume?
Yes.
So I'm just clicking the most recent one on your Instagram. Like, walk me through production of even just this. Like, so it's a music video. High budget music videos haven't really been a thing for very long. So when you do see them, they've died off. So when you see them,
Yeah.
it's cool to see like, oh, finally someone put some, and usually it's only for whoever, Taylor Swift, someone huge like that. So when it's even a band you do or don't know, it's fun to see that they're still putting work into that. So like, walk me through the kind of conversations that go into a modern day budgeted music video.
Sure. First up, I mean, it's usually it's what's funny is it's the same process as most music videos. It's super last minute, even when it's the big ones. Like, I feel like, luckily with the ones that I do with the company, Blesco, the director Jensen, who did Prequel, and he does a lot of the Falling in Reverse videos. There's usually a lot of more previous time on those than you'd normally get on a music video. We usually have like a week or two, as opposed to like sometimes. I mean, I've gotten called for pop stars where it's like, okay, we shoot tomorrow, and you just have to like scramble and just get it ready. 9 lighting diagrams and just the last minute gear order. You just run and go. His, because it's all VFX, every single, like, we just live on a green screen for 4 days usually for his. There's a little bit more prep time for that, just because I have to get onboarded into not only the worlds he wants it to light for, but like his previs is very dense, and there's a lot of, he has an animatic that is every single shot usually chopped into the video, previs by his VFX company. And so, it's a pretty easy onboarding process because he just has the whole video already cut before we even get going. And so I just look shot to shot and like, okay, so if we're in this kind of environment, I know that like all we're doing is this one close-up here. I can kind of get away with cheating this one thing, and we'll save the huge 200 light setup for a different part of the video, which is helpful just because when you're jumping through worlds like that, it's easy to lose track. And, that's the easiest thing to forget about green screen stuff is there isn't anything where you don't put it. And the VFX artists are sort of beholden to whatever you hand them. And so if you haven't already thought about what this whole world is supposed to look like, it's too late once it's out of your hands to really go like, oh, but I meant for the sun to be over there. Like, but I meant for this to actually have this thing here. Like, if it's not there and it's not reflected in the person, it's impossible for them to, realistically relight too much later on. A lot of the contrast and the levels are very much based on what you hand them. So
does that make it easier or harder on you to, because you obviously in most scenarios we try to light so that it's consistent with the environment, but if there is no environment, does that just mean you go like, all right, this is what I want it to look like, and then VFX, is that what you're saying? Like they just go, all right, that's what it looks like.
Luckily, they give, like, at least with these, they'll give me like a wide shot of each scene. And so I'll know like, okay, here's the space I'm playing in. And theoretically, if this is the space, then I need this kind of light, whether it's like a 40-foot softbox overhead, or is it actually a ring of hard lights? Is it only side light? And I can kind of base off their previs, and then I kind of do my own thing on it, but it's still based on what they're hoping to do. And so when they get it back, they can then kind of tweak the background that they already have to fit with how I actually lit it.
Gotcha. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Is it just because he's a VFX artist that you guys don't attempt to do, for instance, like volume stuff, or is that just prohibitively expensive?
I mean, yeah, we're still within the limitations of music video world. And also there are limitations still with, volume spaces and primarily, at least again, there are volume spaces that are 360 degrees, but at our budget level, which is still larger than most music videos, most of Jensen's coverage tends to span 360 almost in every shot. Like we arc every single frame for the most part, or we're up and down or all around. And so I think it's just easier for him to do it on green screen in some ways because, also the speed at which we can move. There are still limitations on volume walls with like, the stuttering and the sort of the image flicker from certain camera positions and moves. And like Jensen is a true wonderful madman, and a lot of his shots are so visceral and have so much motion. We don't have time to mess around technically with would it or wouldn't it work on a volume wall. It's like we're gonna get it right on the green, and we're just taking the person. Like it's so much like even the ground has to be fully redone, and that's part of the thing with the volume wall. Usually on the most recent like Prequel, we actually did build a ton of flooring and sets. Like this is the one that's probably the most integrative of anything I've ever done with him, where every single scene had its own floor build and usually some like foreground elements. In the past, we've done stuff where it's just green screen floor, green screen walls. It's all fake, which is crazy. But this one was in some ways harder because now back then I didn't have to really worry about lighting the full distance of the stage,
Right.
because like as long as he was lit well and the green was keyable, it was okay. But now it's like now I have 70 by 60 foot of set to light on top of the person and have to worry about the green screen. So it's, you know, this one definitely was all in the craziest, biggest lightings that I've ever done.
Yeah. Yeah, I've actually been it's been nice to have VFX tools become more and more accessible. Just even as a DP who edits my own stuff, like I was doing this one shot for a ad, and the guy was like, "Can we get wider?" And I was like, "It was nighttime, right? It was just a thing." And I was like, "Honestly, I'm just gonna make it smaller and then do content the generative AI fill out, yeah, and just make it look like that." And he was like, "You can? Is that gonna look fine?" I'm like, "It'll look great, trust me." And then I get home and I test it, and I was like, "Yep, looks fucking great. We were locked off. No one's gonna notice. You know, just roto out where the guy walks, and you're good."
Yeah, that's what honestly the VFX thing is like one of those. I kind of hate, and this other DP Oren Sofer as well, who kind of hates the whole trend of Hollywood shitting on VFX and saying everything's practical now when it's all lies and there's still so much VFX and everything. He and I talk fairly frequently about that, and it's something that's come up honestly in regards to Mr. Crocket, where like
I saw an interview you guys did, yeah,
the practical puppetry, which is incredible in the movie. I wish people would also notice that there's a lot of invisible, cool VFX work happening to make the puppets work and to make like Crockett's world feel seamless. A bunch of little things in there that are, you know, really nice little VFX tweaks. And I feel like the focus is always, it's always like, well, but the practical is so cool. And it is, but it's only looks so cool because we painted out all the rods holding up the fucking flying puppet bird, you know, like that kind of thing. It's just, luckily actually on this one, there was less of that than there was on Appendage, but there's still so much augmentation to like the big seal, you know, there's, I don't want to get into spoilers, but there's a bunch of stuff in the movie where there's fun VFX scattered throughout.
Shit, that's right. I just remembered it says I can't release this until the 29th.
Yeah.
Is that when the movie comes out?
No, the movie comes out on Friday, this Friday, the 11th. But there's some stuff that we're like, there straight up wasn't a real thing on set. Like we can dig right in if you don't mind.
Yeah,
but,
no, yeah, 100%.
The portal effect from the beginning was something that wasn't prevised. It was like in the script it said a blinding light, you know, opens up in the room and then he goes through, and I just knew that I didn't want to do the safe option, which is just do like neutral or like cold, just something kind of easy that anything could be dropped over later, because I feel like this world is so vibrant and crazy.
Yeah.
It kind of deserved something more wild. And it was sort of a trust in the VFX process that I would give them this crazy color combo that so I took it from one of Brandon's main movie references. So yeah, one of the things that Brandon did going into this film, he didn't give me many horror references at all. The main one, he's like, let's think about New Nightmare as our main horror reference. But in general, I want you to frame this movie within the walls of Menace to Society and Juice. Right. And those were his movie references. And it was like 90s dramas and not horror movies. And I loved it because I've just never had that happen before as a reference for a horror movie, been given only non-horror movies. So I'm like, this is fucking awesome. So I was watching those, and there's a scene in the beginning of Menace to Society where one of the characters is going through like a graduation party, and it's lit with like purple light through a window and red lights inside, or some combination of those two colors. And I was watching it for my like fourth watch, and I go, oh my God, that's fucking it. And so I came to set. I was like, okay, Brandon, I'm going to show you something really crazy. I have no idea if it's going to work, but just like, we got to try it out. And so we built a full, like, I love my grip and electric team on this movie. Yeah. Incredible. Yeah. They built me an actual doorway of Acera tubes that were basically alternating purple and red in different flickering colors, and it was like circling and flashing. And it was like the first time we had Crocket in one of the rooms, and we saw his costume and him in it, and he's like this crazy purple red combo going, and it was like no question. Like, all right, that's it. We're sticking with this the whole movie. This is the look. But I love that it just came from, again, a random party scene in a 90s drama that, you know, would never have normally been a rec for a horror movie, it was cool.
Well, and I love how, so I'm not actually a giant horror fan. Obviously, I interview a lot of people who do horror films because horror films are fun and they get made a lot, but I don't tend to watch them. And one thing I love about this movie is it kind of I wouldn't even classify it as a horror film. It's certainly shocking at times and brutal and like gory. And 5 minutes in, we're, you know, shoving stuff into people's stomachs and getting crazy, you know. But
it gets pretty gross. I'm very happy about that.
Dude, the fucking the bubble gag. I was like, at first I thought he was just gonna pop himself, and then I was like, oh, where's this going? I was like, that is so brutal.
Talk about the perfect blend of VFX that no one would know what it is. So the head was real, like the head blowing up and spitting back was real. And the thing that people might not have caught was we actually had a dummy head that they had 2 rods in it, and they were wiggling them around the mouth, and so the mouth was like moving, and that was actually a dummy head to make the bubble like right before it bursts. But to marry it back to the main shot, what they did was the guy did this incredible performance where he puffed his cheeks out and he veined his eyes out and he was doing it. And then we cut to the dummy shot and then we cut back to his shot. But what they did was just barely in VFX, pulled the cheeks a little bigger and made it just so that it looked like it was cutting in with the practical effect. And then they went to the head popping. It was like one of those things where you'd never know that it was this mix of VFX and real, but it's like perfectly seamless between all 3 of those edits. And it's, loved it.
Yeah, I'm
sorry, you were on a tangent though about not normally being horror. Yeah.
But well, I was gonna say to your point, like I'm a big fan of Todd Vaziri, and I like how much effort he goes through to try to educate people on like how VFX is not. I mean, there was another guy on YouTube who did. I'm sure you saw the series. It was like a 3-part series of how the bad VFX is the VFX that people are complaining about because they don't see good VFX. Exactly. Good VFX is invisible. Yeah.
So I'm moving you around my screen. So yeah, I was just trying to find a. Yeah. No, it's exactly, and I think that's why people and studios have started trying to push this narrative that like only practical effects are good because they're trying to not get caught in this VFX overall are bad. It's just, unfortunately, it was them who put that kind of stigma on it in the first place by forcing people to do too many last minute changes to VFX, and the VFX they did do don't look as good as they would have if they just committed,
right
beforehand. But they caused their own problem.
100%. And also they haven't equipped with the failure of studios to properly make behind the scenes feature edits.
Yeah.
They haven't equipped the audience with the right tool set to describe what they do or don't like. So that feedback is not correct. When people go, oh, I hate VFX, a lot of times we don't, people will be like, oh, they just did a bunch of green screen in this movie. And you're like, there's actually no green screen in it. First of all, second of all, that's not, you mean bad VFX. You don't mean quote unquote green screen. And even if there was, you probably didn't see it, and then the volume, because Disney wanted everyone to know about the volume for The Mandalorian. Now people go, that's better. Or in some cases that's worse. Or, it'd be better if the audience was slightly better equipped to explain what they don't enjoy. And the fact is they just don't enjoy rushed work.
Well, this honestly leads into one of my favorite things to talk about with this movie is that talk about bad effects. Often, a lot of vintage or analog videos try to be fake. Now, like people just have their overlays in After Effects, and they try and drop like VFX static glitches over cuts, and they try and like add a filter to make it look like old footage. Mm-hmm. And we knew from the beginning, we're like, the Crocket show itself, it has to look real. This thing has to be like as close to authentic as possible. And so from the beginning, I was like, we're gonna run it through analog. We're gonna do it the right way. But it also had to be like, it was crazy. It had to be shot the right way to actually look appropriate to be run through that footage. You know what I mean? Like we had to think about, it had to be filmed on a sensor size and on zoom lengths and at a T-stop that actually reflected the period that it would have been shot at in the first place. And the style of lighting, like the crazy, huge overhead ring of fire tungsten, just studio blast that those old kids shows kind of had. Mm. So, it started there. And then from that, went to film emulation and then went back to my, a really great company. My buddy runs it, called Circuit Bent TV, that they just do a ton of, it's all, the whole company is about CRT analog, not only scanning, but glitch art and glitch works. And so he's built boards that can affect every part of the VHS image. They can they can do multiple dirty mixes of multiple feeds. He can glitch it any way you want. And now he has DMX and timing control on the glitches too. So we were doing scenes for Crocket where we could figure out exactly when the glitch needed to happen. We could just program the most ridiculous, heinous, purple static to cover the screen and leave right as Crocket had a line. And so this was like the one thing I was very adamant couldn't be VFX, and this one was like, we got to do this the right way, and so we did. We ran every shot of Crocket in that world through a crazy CRT scanning process where it's like it goes in through VHS, hits all of his boards, we glitched it out, and then we're actually filming a CRT screen. It's not like we just recorded it to a VHS tape and ingested it. I think part of why it works so well and feels so real in the movie is all of our plate shots are of old 90s CRT TVs, and then you take a plate that we shot of the Crocket show on a CRT TV and you stick basically a recorded CRT screen over a CRT TV, and suddenly you get like the actual pixels from it look right when VFX marry the two. It's really, it looks so authentic. It's awesome.
I am so dark in here. Sun's going down. So you're telling me that the TV shots were comped?
Yes. All of the TV shots in the movie are all comped.
Never would have guessed.
And the reason it works is because if we had done like, say we did all digital, you take our Alexa footage of the Crocket show and you just run it through some After Effects filters, and then you smack it over the plate of the TV, add some glow, and you try and like make it look right. You're still missing what made those CRT images so crazy. There was like the spread. Pixels weren't that dense on those screens. Like there was a weird spread to how the diodes actually shot the image out. There was color shifting. There's all this stuff that happens when you actually shoot one of those screens. And especially the glitch part of it itself, if you just take an overlay and you throw it over your footage, it's just a preset overlay, not based on what your footage actually looks like, that just adds some static and goes blah, 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 and goes away. This was using the footage itself to generate the real glitches. And so like, it's not like we just liquefied an image to stretch and come back or whatever. It's like, we had a designated knob and we would turn it and the image would go whoop, and then you'd turn it back and it would go back, and you'd hit a button and it would send it into rainbow mode. But it wasn't just like overlaying the colors, it was taking the real analog image and separating it and shoving it back together. And that's why I think every single glitch in the movie feels so authentic. It's as close to us filming that on a TV as possible. It just wasn't done at the same time. It was filmed on a CRT TV and it was actually through a VHS player just 6 months apart. Yeah. But when you marry the 6K plate of the glitched analog image over the Alexa plate of a TV on set, it feels right because it's the right kind of diode lining up and, over the image. It's crazy. It was, me and him, Danny at Circuit, we've been nerding out about this for months now. So I'm just happy to finally be able to talk about it.
Oh, for sure. And also like you going on rants is better than me going on rants. No one listens to this fucking show from me. Yeah, it looks great. Did I ever tell you about my friend's movie, Dude Bro Party Massacre 3?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like that, the version they did, which would have been like 2014, was they just put recorded the tape or they shot on a red, but they put it on a tape, put the tape player, put the VHS in the VCR and just played it back and recorded it to a different tape player, but they just hit it with baseball bats. Yeah, very inelegant.
See, this is the non-destructive way, and he has a whole ecosystem now. So if you're looking to do this, Circuit Vent TV is absolutely the place to go for, because the control, even that he's developed since then, he's rebuilt the boards and they're fully time coded now, and so you could program an entire like live concert performance like to beat, and you got different glitches hit on the beat every time. It's incredible. So
that's so cool.
We went ham on the movie.
Well, yeah, that's so fucking cool. The thing that always bugs me, after I think we are actually exiting the film emulation era and now squarely are going into the analog era, or whatever you want to call it. People really seem to enjoy, like I see girls at bars, young, not young, but like 22, with like handy cams and little pocket digicams and stuff, like all that's coming back. And, but the thing that always bugged me about film emulation was exactly what you were saying. It never came from the image. It was just grain it was just a noise pattern, and it never felt organic, and you'd have to go to fucking Live Grain to get them to do it for real.
Yeah, the best. I mean, that was the magic of how, like, so Damian Van der Kroosten is just one of the best colorists ever. He's who did Crocket, the actual finishing grade. So we kind of had two colorists. That was the other fun part. A buddy of mine, Jared Rosenthal, did the actual pre-grade on the Crocket show footage that went to the VHS, because it had to happen way before we hit, obviously finishing, had to get all the comps done first. But he did like a really good 70s film emulation on the Crocket stuff that sold extra well because it then went through the VHS and we saw that emulation, how we're used to watching it.
Yeah.
and then you comp that in, and then you take what Damien did, which was he actually had developed like a 90s LUT for us, as well as a 90s grain structure that we used throughout the whole movie that was mapped really well to different parts of the image, like shadows, highlights, and mids in a different way. And it just gave it a really authentic kind of lived in feeling that the movie needed to have. We were fighting a very odd tone. It's like a mid 80s horror movie that's set in 90s Philadelphia, but you've then got a lot of people saying, but you also need to make sure it looks modern and expensive. So there's a very interesting tone as a DP to try and balance, because you've got like the production needs, the director's wants, and then like how to actually enact all of that. And it was a really interesting challenge to try and, I think the 90s, like, it's what you're saying. You can't smack a 90s LUT and a 90s grain and approach it that way without actually exposing the image to sort of be that way as well. And so I watched Crocket back, and a lot of the lighting choices we made, it doesn't even feel like myself. Sometimes it's very weird. We were living so deeply in the worlds of like I said, Menace Society and Juice. We were adhering to like so many of the hyper blue hard edge moonlight and like other things that we were in there, that if we hadn't done that and then you tried to work in that kind of vintage grade to it, it wouldn't have worked as well. And I think that's one of the things Damien did so beautifully. Like, he knew I had to hit this mark right down the middle. And so he had developed this vintage, like this sort of retro look that he managed to polish in a way that never stepped into being like a joke. Like the movie, right. I don't think the movie's look feels like a joke of that era. No. It just sort of feels, hopefully, of the era enough to make you feel like you're watching maybe a 90s film.
Well, that's what I was kind of saying about it not feeling like a horror film. Is not that horror films always look cheap or whatever, but it's like, it looks incredible. It looks incredibly polished. It does look like, I was actually going to ask about the colored lighting and stuff, because that's certainly, even keys are, yellow. They're not tungsten.
Oh, I got some more. Yeah, I got so many funny other things about that. But yes,
perfect.
Keep going.
But all of that made it feel very, not unique in a way, meaning like nothing else looks like this, but just of itself. It felt to the tone of the film was perfect. But the other thing that I think helped, the thing I was going to say earlier, was you're a weird, sick part of the audience, I bet, roots for Crocket. So it's not even a horror film. You're sitting there going, yeah, get him. Fuck Dad.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, Elvis is just awesome to work with. Like, totally, like a lot of what we did later on was just inspired by choices he was making, which I'm also happy to talk about. But yeah, I mean, it was such a thing where we were watching these 90s films, and every day they made fun of me because like I was living with my gaffer, my key group. We all got an Airbnb together in Philly because it's the only way I could afford to bring my hometown, crew with me on this one, because it's still a smaller movie. I mean, right. I'm glad we made it feel like it's maybe not, but it was. And so every day they'd walk in and they wouldn't even look at the TV. They'd be like, "It's Juice, isn't it?" I was like, "It's Juice again." I was just letting that movie seep into my consciousness every day. And so, there was just so many bold choices made in that, like the 90s era of like when true film could take such crazy saturated colors in a way that might clip a digital sensor. They had these rich, luscious sort of tones. And so, how do you make a horror movie that also has those? It definitely had to be, we had to really think about it going into which scenes we were allowed to flex on and which ones we couldn't, because you don't want to do it in a scene that it'll take away from the scene. And so a lot of the dramatic moments, we wheeled it back. We went for more neutral stuff, or at least things that were really based off the practicals in the rooms. But, we always wanted this feeling that when Crocket was showing up, Crocket's bringing his world with him a little bit, which is why the red and purple, like crazy splash of color cuts through every environment it's in. Like, you've got the sort of still saturated blue, but like the blue moon and like all the sort of earthy tones of the main character's house, but like very little color otherwise. And like during the day, the walls themselves are even sort of like, just a neutral beige, warm tone. There's not a lot of pop to it on its own. And we wanted to lean into this, like every time Crocket shows up, shit goes wild. And so even in the first scene, the opening cold open,
Yep.
That is
That's what they're called.
Good English for everyone listening. Yeah, totally. We set a grade for it and then desaturated the first half. so that before Crocket shows up, it feels like a bleached version of it. And then Crocket shows up, and when the lights start flickering, we use that to hide basically a keyframe on all the saturation. So as the lights start to flicker, all the saturation pumps up. So when it cuts back to the shot of the kid, he's now got this like golden light on his face. The wall behind him is like blood red and vibrant. And it's like Crocket just brought some bullshit with
Yeah.
and it was just a fun balance to find, because if you go too far and you make something too bright and colorful, it doesn't feel scary. But he's a character who wants to be bright and colorful, and so it was like a really fun challenge to find when we were allowed to juice it and when we couldn't.
Yeah. Juice it.
No pun intended.
Yeah. At the end of the day, Crocket wants to be a dad, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what were you guys doing when you were doing the more like, because when we talk about like everything being really saturated and whatever, it doesn't ever look unnatural, like, I don't know, like an accident or something. So how are you choosing, these warmer keys to look good and not just like piss yellow or whatever? Like, was there like a specific something you were dialing in?
Yeah. So my gaffer, Nate Thompson, he we have a very specific workflow when we don't have a DMX board. Instead, he's got like a little iPad vest thing that he can control the lights from. So me and him just sit at a monitor, and he's like typing on his iPad and like just he'll just listen to me as I'm commenting to myself, and he'll just start like dialing little things casually while I'm complaining about some part of the image I don't like, until, I don't realize he's subconsciously just sort of been like fixing stuff that he's overheard me talking about. But we'll look at the scene to start, and a lot of it was based on the practicals we were given. That was kind of the coolest part. Was Michelle Patterson, the production designer. We did appendage together. We've known each other for a long time, and she knows if she gives me lamps, I'm going to use the shit out of them. Yeah. And a lot of these lamps had because they were more a vintage design, thicker, almost muslin based shades on them, and so naturally what was coming out of them was already warm, and so I never balanced to fix that. I was like, if it's going to be warm, I'm just going to say this practical wants to be warm, and now it's warm. And I also think I spent so much time in music video land lighting every type of complexion, height actor, every form of person you can imagine in terms of talent. And one of my favorite things is I feel like of any ethnicity, darker skin tones often reflect warm light very well. And sometimes a lighter skin tone like mine might eat it up and turn it a little greenish or skew it in a weird way, but a darker complexion might just take it and it'll warm itself up a little bit more, and you get a really, really lovely warm tone out of it.
White people it's just are annoying to color correct.
It's tough. Yeah, you get the skin tone pushing in one way, and it doesn't. There's only a thin world where very pale complexions want to land.
Yep.
And so luckily I just had experience playing with different kind of color lights in that situation, and so I just knew we didn't want to push things too cold, I think, ever, except for when it was like blue rim moonlight, and it wasn't going to affect the skin tone too much. And so that was a big staple for us. Like 90s, honestly, since the 70s to like almost through the 90s, vibrant blue moonlight was the way to go. Like HMIs with full blue on it. You watch some of these movies and there's like a blue, like Hellraiser, but that was intentional. But like even a drama like Juice, he's walking down an alley and there's a blue fucking laser beam down the alley that's supposed to be the moon. Like, we have to do it. Like, it feels unnatural. It feels stagey. It feels fake. But that was part of the time period. So we're going to do it. And so we did. All of our moon is like blue as fuck. And it's one of those things where I watch it back. I'm like, that doesn't really feel like what I'd normally do, but it fits. It fits the movie. So we're just going to do it. And it sort of just wanted to work itself out. I feel like the style Brandon set out for us, and then the practical that was given by Michelle, and then what Crocket brought to it, it just all sort of wanted to fall into place. All that said and done, the reason it all doesn't feel too forced is Damien, the colorist finishing it out, really knew how to massage the tones into like a very dense place that didn't feel digitally pushed. Like, it all feels like it would sit on a film print about the same way. And so none of it ever clipped out so hard it looked like we just like burnt the sensor on like an A7. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's times when you're shooting with a smaller digital sensor, you shoot a saturated LED and suddenly you just get weird clipped colors. And we made sure to not clip it on set, but he also knew where to not push it too far in post, where we gave him probably 120% of what ended up in the actual edit. He was able to dial it back into a more analog feeling place.
Sure. Yeah. I can't remember why I got excited. I was like, ooh, and then it went away. But what was your lighting package? Because obviously on a, not that it was a tiny budget, but a smaller budget thing, so you got to have an economy of motion and economy of gear and whatnot.
Yeah. So we had two sort of setups ongoing, because the stage, the way it worked with production, we set up Crocket World, the happy version first. We had to shoot it out before we fucked it up. And so we built Michelle built this incredible kids show set, and then we talked for days about how I was going to build that sort of overhead tungsten array to not only look good in camera but also on camera when you pull back and you see it in world, because there were plenty of times where you see the whole studio lighting rig overhead, so we had to make sure it worked for both things. And so we had ongoing 30 tungsten lights that just lived on the show because they were just rigged the whole time to a rat pack in the ceiling. This is one of the coolest things we got to do. So normally a lot of people in our situation would only have access to hand dimmers and things, but because of our brilliant Best Boy Electric and also Nate, my gaffer, being very good with his rat pack and controlling it through Luminaire, we got a 26 channel rat pack box that we hung in the ceiling, fed all the tungsten lights into it, and ran a wireless receiver. And so we sent 30 tungsten lights to the iPad. And so he was digitally controlling all these tungsten units. And so they were all everything in the ending, in the Hell world, we had thought initially maybe we should go for putting tubes on the ground and making they'd cover it with VFX fire later.
Right. Flame effect. Everyone loves flame effect.
We were worried that was going to kind of box us into a corner, and we wouldn't, I don't know, it might also bump the VFX cost so much it wasn't worth it. So we were what would happen? If you were to take Crockett's real set and then someone just dropped a bomb in it, what would happen? And because that's kind of what it looks like in there. It looks like someone dropped the fucking A-bomb through the ceiling. It blew a hole in the roof and the whole set exploded. It's kind of how it feels. Yeah. And from the beginning, Michelle, it's got to be smoky. It's got to be red and it's all on fire, but not with real fire. And so we were thinking, when you do tungsten lights, they get warmer as they get lower in intensity. And so if we were to lean into the idea of what would happen if you dropped a bomb on set, all these lights wouldn't work properly anymore. And so it was every tungsten light was on a pulse or dimmed to 50%. And so through the ending, that's why that whole world feels it's kind of constantly shifting and swirling and nothing feels real. It's because every single tungsten light through the entire ending is just on an oscillation, and they're all on different speeds. And so every single light is at a different speed oscillating. And it never goes to 100, so we never got to neutral again.
Right.
And then in camera, we balanced, I think I balanced 7,000 Kelvin in camera or something.
Sure, yeah.
So we took tungsten and we made it ultra tungsten. And so then all these suddenly you had this weird thing where is the world on fire or is it just the stage lights? And you kind of didn't know. And that's sort of what Crockett's Hell is is this hell? Is this still a big play? Is this a stage show? We don't know what this is. And we kind of wanted to have him to have this evil circus ringleader effect, where he's got his circus lights overhead, but they don't really work anymore. And we actually, God, our electric team and our grip team got so into it. They were we have the coolest idea. And so we walk in and they messed, they canted some of the rails. So the lights are hanging at angles now instead of how they had been. And they dropped lines, they had perfectly spooled lines of the whole thing. But for Hell World, they just started cutting the ties. So the cables were hanging from the ceiling and the ropes were all askew. And everyone got so into it. And so that was one package was just dedicated all tungsten, permanently on a rat pack to Crocket World. And then with us, we had a genuinely pretty small breakout kit. We had a lot of night exteriors in the movie, a ton. Right. But I'd initially been you want to see up and down 7 city blocks. I need a balloon. There's no way to do this without a balloon. And through the power of friendship and creativity, we trimmed down just how wide a lot of the shots were so I could do it with a more, not traditional approach, what's the way you put it? I honestly, a more practical approach, so how we'll phrase it. We took all the unused tungsten lights from the set and we just put them on stands with a ton of branchos, and we just started blasting houses, like not gracefully in any way, just like a student film taking a 650 and just aiming it at a house.
Good.
And we just started to do that. We were just like, fuck it, blast that house, and we then put enough branches that it felt like it was coming through trees, and it didn't really feel as just obvious.
Yeah.
But so much of the exteriors of this movie are just lit with us being like, fuck it, blast it. And I have some photos I can maybe even send you later that are like, just rows of old mole lights on the side of the road with 7 different layers of branchos in front of them. So it just felt like this weird textured street light hitting all their exteriors. And then we had our LED stuff. So we had a couple vortexes. We had the go-to. We had a couple light sock Duplo 40s. I use those Duplo 40s everywhere. Those are just the indie lifesaver. Light matte spectrum, and my gaffer and I have fallen in love with the Astera Hydras.
I've got a pack of 4 of them. They're great.
They are the best accent light ever. They just go. They can go anywhere. At the right quality to like do a specular ping in the background. And there were times where like in Hellworld, we lit the back of the set with just like one of those off in a corner, just raking down like a 40-foot wall, just to catch like, not to expose the wall, just to catch the specular stuff going down the wall. And like, it's just so tiny, you can just plop them, we have plopping hydras everywhere. And what else do we have? Oh, I mean, the Nix bulbs. Nix bulbs are the go-to for on location stuff. Just, that's how we got a lot of our super dialed, all these practical colors. Like we had a nice lamp and it looked warm already, and we were like, but if we just warm it up more. Yeah. And so we often would lean into what it was already doing because we had the Nix bulb control, and we had a couple HMIs, but it was slim. I mean, this movie was slim. I think I had an M18 and a Jolico.
Oh.
And so, we were working within not a lot, and it kind of had to be that way because we were going so fast. We didn't have time to set up for a lot. And we weren't living in scenes like, we didn't have a day where you just did a 2-page scene in one room where it has to stay consistent all day. We were doing like 30 shots a day, 35 shots a day. And so you're never in a room long enough to worry about consistency. So we kept the package kind of small. Luckily, again, our production designer gave us so many elements to play with. Like we found this perfect lace curtain for, this was one of the things that we noticed in a lot of these 90s films was there's so much texture between the outside and the inside because they always had beads, curtains, lace. They had so many different layers in front of these windows. And so all of our windows are usually multi-layered in this, which is how we got away with like, we developed a tactic for lighting the windows where we knew we'd be going through Major and Summer's bedroom sets, which were builds, and the hallway, which was a build, and then it connected to the real house. And there's literally scenes where you can see into the actual hallway and into one of the real bedrooms from the hall, but we weren't allowed to shoot in there. And so we had to match everything from there to there. So like our approach to lighting the windows on the stage, we actually had to match it to real life, because if we didn't light them the same way, you might think that was the stage instead. Nice. Because we were in a very small town in Jersey, and there weren't a lot of streetlights. You couldn't see shit outside the practical location windows. So it looked as dark as a stage would. So we had a tactic of you take a vortex on hard mode and you tilt it up, and so it hits the top of the window, and it like basically casts a little moonlight gradient coming down, but it leaves the bottom open with no color on it to then hit like a street light. And if you don't give the separation, we were noticing on our first couple of days, we had the mood hitting the whole window and the tungsten hitting the window, and it just mushed. You know what I mean? Like you just got this weird color blend. And so we started to do things where we would use the vortex hard mode to really sculpt only to like a corner of moon, put a brancho in front of it, and then use a tungsten to hit the other not lit up corner. And so the whole window was exposed, but it was just this interesting color gradient across every single window. And with enough branchos, we did it on every single window for the summer / major house, and you just can't tell which is where or when because it all matches. Which is a weird little fun system we developed. And we would start putting like Nix bulbs 5 feet away from the window so it looked like a street lamp outside, even though it was just a Nix bulb just hanging out on its own. And as long as you didn't rack focus to the background, you couldn't tell. If you did, it looked really stupid, but luckily we never did. So we had to get creative because it was slim.
That's honestly the reverse of a trick that I stole from now I'm going to steal that one too, because I literally just did something like that last week for interior hotel scene. And yeah, it turned into mush. And I just kept at a certain point, I was like, I can't keep fighting it. Just let it hit the ground. Fuck it. But I can't remember who it was, but they were saying they had a lot of good luck faking daylight by shooting a super hard light into the bottom of the thing to suggest sunlight. And then they would just put like an Astera tube above it so that the soft light was actually affecting the interior, but the image of it looked like a hard skip, or like it was the sun. And I was like, that's cool. That's a good idea. But that's the nighttime version.
One of the things that we also wanted to try on this one, because we knew we had a lot of daytime scenes in the stage builds for the bedrooms, but no, obviously tiny budget. We didn't have any backdrops. Like we'd have no, the vinyl backdrops you can backlight. So we had to figure out a way to see out, and like it was just, there were shears, but like even if you just light up shears, you can tell the thing out there. And we're like, how do we simulate that there's a something in the distance that's hotter than what my biggest pet peeve is smacking diffusion flat on a window frame and then just shooting a light into it, because that's not how light works ever. And I used to do it all the time. I still sometimes you have to, there's no choice, but like we luckily had enough space. We had these shears where we took ultra bounces, like 12 by 20s, and put them outside each window and put an HM or a vortex and HMI under, bounce it into the ultra bounce. So it wasn't the window frame that was overexposed. It was something in the background behind the window frame overexposed. And then we would just send a little dapple onto the curtains themselves. And so you ended up getting this idea that like maybe it was the sky blown out outside, but it wasn't like you could tell there was the window frame itself was blown out, which usually with how the shadow, like when you do that, you can't put people outside. Like there's a shadow passing. You can't put like branchos outside to get dapple on the windows. It's just like womp, like an LED screen for a window. And so we were able to get more depth by doing ultra bounce, blast it, and then put a tree outside, blast that behind, like the sun's hitting it and hitting the window. So you get this like apparent depth, even though it's just ultra bounce in a plant.
Yeah. Well, and also the diffusion to the window trick obviously affects the way that the light source enters the room in general. It's gonna widen out and flat, like maybe that's the look you're going for, but it certainly then becomes a very massive source in relation to the room.
Yes. Yeah, and this gave us a lot more shape and control. It was coming through that little porthole of the window, which was great.
Yeah. The thing that I love about the way that you think, and I think it's something that a lot of people seem to clamor for, at least online. I need to be spending less time online, but I'm still there. Is that you are thinking about, it's so easy for a young creator or even a producer or whoever to go, I want a 90s aesthetic. And then you just, exactly as you said, you look up, glitch, VHS glitch, and you slap it on whatever you got. But being able to go deep and think about why those things were that way and replicate that not only gives you the aesthetic you want, but it leans into that thing we were talking about earlier about people not liking VFX or whatever. It's like, it's real. It's good. It's good because it's real. It's not an aesthetic.
Yeah.
It is a methodology. Same thing with the lighting. Yeah. It's a methodology of why it doesn't need to look good. It needs to be it. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing where, you want people to be like, oh, that's a good looking image. But like if they think it too much, that means that they're not looking at the movie anymore. And it's really satisfying, honestly, now to me sometimes when no one mentions it. Like a review comes out, no one says anything about the looks. I think, sometimes that means sometimes it might mean you did a bad job. But to me, sometimes it also means you made the movie look the way they think that movie should look, that they didn't even think about how it looked. And I to me, that's something I've been very interested in. It requires a little bit of ego death where you have to be like, I can't show off. And it's the same deal. Like you can't say, I want to get a 90s look and then light it however you instinctively light things, because then you're just doing it for yourself and it's not going to have it. And so you have to kind of give up on a little part of what you want for what is required from the film a little bit. It's a weird, hard to swallow pill sometimes. But like I said, I watch this sometimes and I go, that doesn't look like anything I've ever shot before or probably ever will again. It doesn't even look like I did it to me sometimes now, which is cool. I really love that because I'm very judgmental of myself. And
you can separate yourself from this one.
Yeah, just because it's such a strong push in a weird direction I've never done that, like, still there's some shots where I can see that I didn't quite get it the way I wanted. And I'm like, oh,
Sure.
dumbass. But like that's how it goes. That's how we all are to ourselves. Like if
Yeah.
you don't self-critique a healthy amount, you don't get better. But it is weird to just try and be like totally distance yourself from what the movie, like what you want versus what the movie wants. It's a very weird balance.
Well, and it's also, I think you'd probably agree that like when you're given constraint, usually constraint is where creativity lives, right? And if the constraint is the film must look a certain way, I imagine that can end up being more fun because now instead of like putting everything on your own back, like how do I make this look the way I want it to look? You're like, okay, cool. Now I get to make it look the way it's supposed to, and it's more like putting a puzzle together and less like writing a song, where it's coming from your heart versus, it's more manageable mentally, I feel.
I think the dream is that people don't think about this movie being able to look any other way.
Yeah.
Not necessarily if they comment on how good of a job you did, how incredible it looks. It's like the most stunning thing they've ever seen. It's like if they don't say anything, but they just don't question this movie could have been anything else, I think that's the best job you can do. And it's it's a little tough because everyone wants validation, but also like,
but I think to anyone, including you, who kind of feels that way, I think the audience's standards are so high now that if they don't say anything, chances are you've met that criterion, and so they don't say anything. So that means you've done like the best job.
The expectation,
yeah. It's when people think that it's,
there's a point to me sometimes when you hear like, sorry. Sorry, we're
desyncing like crazy.
I'm so sorry. Hell yeah. Let's let it settle. All right.
No.
We did it.
Okay. Go for it.
Okay, cool. Where if you make something that people comment on how the movie looks and not how the movie made them feel, I feel like you distracted them a little bit in the wrong way. You know what I mean? But I don't know, or that's just my opinion, man.
Well, I've seen a lot of sort of meta commentary about filmmaking these days about how everything's too flat and everything's too dark, and I just wish people would go back to making bold choices. And luckily, even though that was what the film wanted, that's what you did. So I think at a certain point, when a lot of people do end up seeing this on Hulu on Friday,
nice work. Thank you.
Yeah. I think they probably will respond that it looked good only because it's something that they haven't seen, and I have seen comments on various forums and Letterboxd and whatever about how most film looks the same because, they will usually say digital sensors and LEDs, but like, it's all just a tool. But I think you've inadvertently stumbled into a look that people have actually been excited for.
I hope so, man. Me and my gaffer, we love color. We love throwing as much color into everything we do. And it's actually something, the movie that I'm prepping right now with him, it's the dead opposite. It's, it's very much inspired by like The Strangers and The Invitation, which are bleak, not saturated movies very much. And so it's fun to like have gone from a feature that was balls to the wall, whatever color we wanted. It's fun. It's interesting. It's fun to have the limitation to now be like, all right, what are the two like tones we're allowing ourselves to have in the scene, and then we're going to squash that range even more. Like if we normally did like, balance to 4300 in camera, Moonlight's 56 and Tungsten's 32. So now it's like we're going to move those ranges even tighter. So it's like say balance to 4300. Now Moonlight is 47 and Tungsten is 4. So like we really there's just a little bit of there's still color balance, there's still range, but it's like throwing an audio compressor on the white balance a little bit, so it keeps it feeling we're trying to go for a bleaker feeling, so a more natural one. I think that's something really like about that movie, The Strangers. It's like there's no moon, like not traditionally. It's silvery or white, but it never goes cold. Thing. Am I kind of like crazy? I just saw my internet connection is unstable.
Yeah, I got to send you a screenshot of they've put like a pastel filter on your image. Yeah, and somehow the one recording is set. I don't know how. Zoom
I don't know why suddenly it just got awful, but
I did an interview earlier today and it was all so bad, so I think it's me too. but not the interview was bad. The connection was bad. But that's interesting that you liken it to putting a compressor on the image. That I'm gonna have to think about that for a minute, because we think about a dynamic range so much, but to limit the visual range is interesting.
Yeah, it'll be a new experience.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't even know what I think about that. I'm like, how would I do that? And also, what would I do? I had, over the pandemic, I had to become a freelance colorist and stuff, and I've been doing way more color work now. And now I think about everything in both of those worlds of like, how would I shoot that and how would I color that? And would I be fighting it, or like, yeah, that's just gonna be a fun brain exercise for myself.
I think audio and video tools go hand in hand a lot.
Yeah.
I have a background in music, and I feel like that has helped me find ways to express what I'm going for visually on set, even if sometimes it only makes sense to me.
I know, honestly, every time I grew up as a drummer, and I played guitar a little, but drummer my whole life, and especially in editing, boy, does having a background in rhythm come in handy. But I've asked a bunch of different DPs who are musicians, which apparently is a lot of us, and architects. Like, what is that combination between music and film beyond just the simple, storytelling kind of thing? One thing that I saw was Josh Homme from Queens of the Stone Age talking about why he doesn't share freely his like pedal board and like how he gets his sound. And he's like, it's cool to know what your favorite musicians did. In our case, filmmaker. Imagine I'm talking about filmmakers for this whole analogy, so I don't have to redo it. But he's like, it's cool. It's cool to know what your favorite musicians did, but you don't learn anything from that. That's not helpful. And also, you don't want a Gibson going through a Fender amp. Peanut butter and chocolate. I get it. It's great, but you don't need to do that. You want to be what isn't happening so that you are unique in some way. And he said that by trying to figure out how he gets his sound, that path will take you to finding your own sound versus being very prescriptive about it and saying like, oh, it's this pedal, this compressor, this amp. Now you sound like Josh. You don't learn anything from that. And I think that the same is true with filmmaking. We're like, oh, he got this camera and this light and this LUT and David Fincher, obviously everyone likes to ape, and it's like, oh, he only uses these focal lengths and he puts it here, and it's always the two cameras. It's like, by being prescriptive, you're not doing art, and also you're not thinking about what you're making. You're being very color by numbers, and that's kind of like trying to appease everyone. It's the same, I think, mechanism in your brain where you try to make something for everyone and you please nobody. If you're prescriptive with your art, it has the same.
So I have an interesting counterpoint, because I've been asked a lot of times by many people who say, "Why do you share all your BTS? Aren't you afraid like?"
Well, that's different.
Are you afraid like people are going to do what you're doing? Why do you tell them exactly what you're using? Why do you tell them how you got exactly what you did? And I think my argument has always been, there's no way to be at that prescriptive in film, because we're never going to be in the same location with the same production designer at the same time of day, and we're shooting the same scene. And so like, I can tell you how I did this scene, but even if you take how I did that scene and put it on yours, it's not going to look the same, even if you do exactly what I did, because everything else is different. Yeah. And so I've often felt good about sharing it, because some people just might not know what tools are out there. A lot of the times when you're coming up, you don't even know certain things exist. I'm sure I still don't know half the things that exist. I'm not crazy high level to know every tool that's out in the world. And so when I see a DP talk about some crazy thing I've never heard of, I'm really grateful, because I don't even know how they use it. That's the funniest thing about BTS photos. I'll post my overhead, I'll post my BTS, but like half the time on the day, some shit slops and you probably changed up half of what you drew anyway. But it's like, if people understand why you did something, then they can understand why they might need to do something similar but different on their own project. And like, the thing that separates, I think, maybe I disagree with Josh on. I feel like, again, what's going to happen? He tells everyone his pedal board, like, they'll never make the decisions he makes. They'll never have the touch he has. They'll never have the musicianship and the years of experience he has. So even if they use the exact same thing, he's not ripping them out of anything because they can't be him. And like part of why I think every DP is so different and so good, I can tell you the exact same gear I had on a project. You can even try and shoot that project with the same package and it's going to look different because you're you.
Yep.
And that can either be a good thing or a bad thing. And I think it's just, why not share the experience? Because it just means you're going to have better looking stuff to look at.
Yeah.
Like, it means that other people are going to shoot stuff you like to look at if you tell them how to do stuff you like to do. And they, they're interested. Like there's no harm because I could walk into a room on a scout and another DP could walk into a room on a scout and the director will say, here's my scene. And like, you go, here's the gear you have, here's the camera and the lights, go. And there's very little chance you two are going to put things in exactly the same place.
Right.
And it all comes down to your own personal taste. So I don't know. I think sharing is caring.
So
I Mr. Crocket.
Yeah, I fully agree with you there. I more so meant the analogy in my head is less about specific gear. I think sharing, behind the scenes photos, lighting diagrams, that's how we all learn.
Yeah.
The thing that I try to push back on is exactly what you said. Don't make this exact thing thinking you're going to get my look. This is to inform your journey. So the point I thought he was trying to make in that clip was, you need to learn what all these things do. And if you do end up sounding like me, I don't, I know he's particular about that, but in getting out of the analogy, like it's great. It's important to know all the tools and it's important to know how they work and how you can achieve certain things. But at no point should someone learning assume that by doing X, they will receive Y. It should inform your next new thing, Yeah. That's what I believe.
I would agree. Yeah.
And I also, I think I've been shouting about needing more special features so people can learn from day one, of this podcast.
Absolutely.
Every day, more fucking special features.
Yeah.
Show us how the stuff. I've said this a few times and now it's like a thing. I have watched all 12 hours of the Lord of the Rings extended edition behind the scenes. I think those got me into filmmaking. That, like the Matrix BTS DVD, and probably those two. Honestly, I've never seen Lord of the Rings. I've seen all the behind the scenes. I can tell you exactly how that film is made. I've never watched the movies. No.
Oh, you gotta have the religious experience that we've all had. You got to sit down. And now you got to watch all 3 extended back-to-back Lord of the Rings movies in one day. Well,
and the funny part is like the long, I'm 34. The longer I haven't seen it, the funnier it is. It's like,
it's pretty funny.
People do that with Star Wars and everyone goes, oh my God, you haven't seen Star Wars, except it's Lord of the Rings. And it's like, I've seen the clips. Like, I know what it looks like. I couldn't really tell you the story. Yeah. Oh, Peter Jackson's a fucking G. Did you see his World War I like recolored, remastered documentary thing?
Oh yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Oh my goodness. I love that, man. And Guillermo del Toro. I think that was the other one. Was like Hellboy. Just all the production design, the work that goes into a Guillermo del Toro film on production design and costuming alone is a masterclass.
Talk about a dream production to work on, man. Oh my God.
Yeah, even like Pinocchio, even though it was stop motion, I was just like, this is so Guillermo. Like I love that he has that signature. Mm-hmm. And again, no one can do it like Guillermo, like because it comes from here. It comes from the old mind palace. So like every time he puts something up, I'm like, yep, that's you. That's him. Every second of it. Well, shit, man, it's been an hour already, and I have to go to some gala.
Wow, fancy.
Yeah. It was great talking to you, man. And like I said, I as someone who doesn't, every time I get a horror film, I'm always like, all right, I'll skip through it because I don't really enjoy horror. And then I ended up watching the whole thing, and I was just like, I was one of the sickos who was like, yeah, Crocket, get him.
That's what Elvis did best, man. He's so endearing and yet such a psycho. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's perfect.
The character is so cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm excited. I read the director talking about like, hey man, he's immortal, so we could do this a bunch. And I'm like, fuck yeah, let's do it. You know,
Oh yeah,
give me
our
10 of
whole team
those.
would come back. The entire crew just loved the movies, making it so much, and like the character that I think all of them would probably come back for a sequel. So it'd be
Hell
pretty
yeah.
cool.
We'll see. Hulu, I know you're listening. Do it. Fund it. All right, I gotta go. I'll let you go, but I'll keep in touch.
Cool, man. Sounds good.
Later, buddy.
See ya.
Frame and Reference is an Owlbot production. It's produced and edited by me, Kenny McMillan, and distributed by Pro Video Coalition. If you'd like to support the podcast directly, you can do so on Patreon by going to frameandrefpod.com, where you can get all the episodes, and clicking the Patreon button. It's always appreciated, and as always, thanks for listening.